Welcome to Hampton Bay Stories. If you enjoy this series, we invite you to like and share this story. Then subscribe to our channel. Our story today is called A Suitable Match. Titine Girard was sweeping at the premier organics factory, smelled of crushed leaves and bitter roots. Long tables were lined with drying bundles of herbs, their sharp scent mixing with the hum of fans. Titine pushed her broom along the concrete, sweeping stems and dust into a dull heap. This was her punishment, the hours she owed for the crime she did not commit. She just followed her mother's order, but she bore the brunt of the punishment. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but the intent was enough for the judge to sentence her to 3 years community service. Better than jail, Titine told herself, but the humiliation was its own weight. This was Gilles Chancellor's company. It was his naturopathic factory, the pride of the island, where teas and tinctures were made for customers far beyond Martinique. To Titine, it was another reminder of everything she had been told could be hers. Instead, she was a worker with sore arms and dirt on her shoes, cleaning his floors. From the windows, she heard music drift down from the habitation. Guests were arriving for the wedding, sleek electric cars humming into the courtyard, headlights sweeping across the lane. Laughter rose with the sound of champagne glasses, and the faint glow of camera flashes lit the verandas. Her pulse quickened. Chance was up there. Taylor would be with him. When the supervisor turned his back, Titine leaned her broom against the wall and slipped out the side door. She climbed the slope, her heart hammering, and crouched by the hedges near the great house. Lanterns glowed on the veranda, where Chance stood with Taylor on his arm. His smile belonged only to her. Taylor leaned in close, claiming him without a word. Titine's throat ached. Taylor's gaze swept the hedges, sharp and knowing, and Titine shrank back into the shadows, her cheeks burning. Then she turned and fled into the barn. Inside the barn, the air was cooler, but heavy with hay and dust. She pressed her back to a post, trying to steady her breath. "You should not be here." The voice came from the shadows. Spencer stepped forward, sleeves rolled above his forearms, his jacket slung over a rail. She recognized him at once. Diana Silva had brought him, and she had seen him earlier among the guests, smiling in photographs, shaking Chance's hand. "I could say the same for you," Titine said quickly, her tone sharp with embarrassment. Spencer tilted his head. "I am a guest." He paused and glanced down at her coveralls emblazoned with the Premier Organics logo. "It appears that you took a wrong turn at the gate. The factory is on the other side of the plantation." Her face flushed. "It is a habitation. Plantations are where American blacks worked as slaves. Yet you're here, doing community service," he said calmly. Disarmed, she said nothing in response. That was too easy, Spencer thought to himself. No wonder Chance preferred Taylor. She was tough as nails, but she worked hard to maintain her elegant facade. He stepped forward and changed his tone to one that was more conciliatory. "It's a shame he doesn't notice how hard you work." She nodded, although she knew in truth she did as little as possible. "Then you ran here. Not away from the community service, but toward something else." Her chest tightened. "It is none of your concern." He leaned back against the post, his expression even. "Maybe not. But I saw how you looked at him, and how she pulled him close." The words broke her defenses. "She treats me as if I am nothing. And he lets her. My mother told me I was meant for him, that I would stand beside him. Now I sweep his floor while they laugh at me." Spencer's voice softened. "That anger is not shame. It is strength. You know you deserve better." Her eyes filled. "Do not mock me." "I would not," he said. "I am not one of them." She sank onto a bale, drained. He stayed a step away, respectful. "Why are you speaking to me?" she asked. "Because I know what it is to be dismissed," Spencer said. "To be inside their circle and still outside it. And because you are more than they allow you to be." The tension in her chest eased, just a little. She looked at him, and for the first time that day she felt seen. The soft purr of the electric cars returned to the drive. Guests climbed into their cars, doors shut, voices spilling out in bursts of laughter. Headlights swept across the hedges. One by one, the cars rolled down the lane toward the restaurant in town. Within minutes, the habitation was still. The inn was empty. Spencer sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "You are not invisible to me," he said softly. Her breath trembled. "Why are you kind to me?" "Because I want to be," he answered. He touched her hand, warm and steady, waiting for her to pull away. She did not. His thumb traced her knuckles until she met his gaze. When he leaned in, the kiss was slow, patient, giving her time to choose. Her lips parted against his, clumsy, conveying her lack of experience. The barn darkened around them, the outside world forgotten. She clung to him, her heart pounding, her anger dissolving into something raw and urgent. When he eased her down onto the hay, his movements were careful, guiding, as though he understood her inexperience. She gave herself to him, trembling and afraid. While the guests dined in town, Titine lay in the shadows of the barn, breathless, her body shaken, her spirit unmoored. She had crossed a line she could never step back over. For the first time in her life, she had chosen for herself. The first light of dawn crept through the gaps in the barn wall, thin stripes cutting across the straw. Titine stirred, disoriented at first, the rough ground pressing into her hip, the smell of manure and hay sharp in her nose. Her back ached as she shifted, the damp earth clinging to her dress. For a moment she kept her eyes closed, willing the night before to vanish like a dream. But when she reached out, the space beside her was empty. Her hand touched only cold straw. The shape of Spencer's body had been there once, faintly pressed into the earthen bedding, but now it was nothing more than a shadow. Her heart sank. She sat up quickly, brushing hay from her arms, her hair tangled and sticking to her cheeks. A laugh floated from the direction of the inn, muffled but distinct. She froze, her pulse racing. She knew that voice. It was Taylor. Titine pulled her dress on, and then the coveralls on top of it. The factory was closed today. There was no reason for her to be there. Spencer had left her here before dawn. He slipped back into the clean sheets of a Real bed, while she had lain curled on the damp ground like a discarded thing. The shame struck hot across her chest, burning her throat. She wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders, trying to hide from the air itself. "Mon Dieu, what did I do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The goats stirred in their pen. A hen fluttered her wings, clucking irritably. The ordinary sounds mocked her, reminding her of where she was, not in a lover's arms, not in a home, but in a barn surrounded by animals. Her cheeks burned as she scrambled to her feet. Straw clung to her coveralls. She brushed at herself with frantic hands, though nothing she did could strip away the feeling of being soiled. She slipped through the barn door into the cool air of morning, keeping her head low. Already staff moved across the yard, preparing breakfast for the wedding guests. If anyone saw her emerge from here, they would know. She ducked her head and hurried toward the factory, each step heavier with the shame that clung to her. The weeks that followed blurred together. She worked her hours at the factory, sweeping the concrete floors beneath the long drying tables, the sharp scent of herbs catching in her throat. Day after day she bent to her punishment, her arms sore, her body weary. Yet nothing compared to the weight she carried inside her. The sickness began in the mornings, sharp and sudden. At first she told herself it was nerves, or perhaps the heat. But as the days passed, the truth pressed harder. Her body ached, her breasts sore, her skirts tighter across her waist. She had not had a cycle. By the fourth week, she could not deny it any longer. She was carrying Spencer's child. It was late evening when she finally spoke the words aloud. The small kitchen was lit by a single lamp, its glow throwing shadows across the cracked tiles. Her mother sat at the table, snapping beans into a bowl, her hands quick and practiced. Titine sat across from her, twisting her fingers together until they ached. "Maman," she began, her voice unsteady. Celine did not look up. "What is it?" Titine's chest rose and fell with uneven breath. "I think I'm pregnant." The beans slipped from her mother's hand, scattering across the table. She stared at her daughter, eyes sharp, mouth tightening into a thin line. What did you say? I'm pregnant, Titine whispered. Celine's voice dropped low. Whose child? Titine's lips parted, but Spencer's name caught in her throat. She imagined the disgust in her mother's eyes if she said it, imagined the way the church women would whisper about his dark skin, about her foolishness. She saw herself scorned, cast out, left alone. Fear pressed her into silence. At last she forced the words out. It's Gilles. The kitchen fell still. Celine stared, her face unreadable, then her lips curved into something like triumph. She clasped her hands together. The Chancellor air, she breathed. Do you realize what this means? Titine's stomach turned, but she forced herself to nod. Celine rose to her feet, pacing the narrow room. They cannot deny you now. Taylor may wear the ring, but you carry the blood. A man cannot ignore his own child. This will lift us. This will put our name where it belongs. Tears pricked at Titine's eyes. Yes, Maman. Celine spun back toward her, eyes bright. You must hold your head high. No shame, no tears. You carry his child. You are not some servant girl. Do you hear me? Titine's voice cracked. I hear you. Her mother leaned closer, her voice fierce. Good. Then you will not speak his name again. Not to me. Not to anyone. From this night forward, it is Gilles. Do you understand? Titine nodded quickly, though her heart thudded with dread. Celine smoothed her apron with shaking hands, her mind already racing. We will keep this quiet for now. The right time will come to reveal it. But when we do, it will be our salvation. Titine lowered her gaze, her fingers gripping the edge of the chair until they hurt. She whispered, Yes, Maman. Her mother smiled faintly, already lost in her own plans. At last, she murmured, At last we will have our place. But Titine felt only the weight of the lie pressing deeper into her chest. She clutched her stomach, the secret growing within her. Spencer's child. The man who had brought her low and left her on the ground in the barn. Now she carried him with her every step. The last months of Titine's pregnancy stretched on like a shadow that would not lift. She worked fewer hours at the factory now, but the air was still heavy with the scent of drying herbs and roots, and the noise of the machines rattled through her bones. Every time she pressed her hand to her swelling stomach, her fear deepened. Celine had not told a soul. She guarded the secret as fiercely as she would guard a locked chest of gold. When neighbors asked about Titine's condition, she answered with a clipped voice that it was family business. In church, when women turned to look at her daughter's rounded figure, she lifted her chin and dared them to whisper. No one spoke to her face, but Titine could feel the weight of their glances. Eventually, Titine did not leave the house. There was no way to hide the truth. At night, lying in the narrow bed in her room, Titine whispered into the dark. Please, God, let the baby look like me. Let the truth stay hidden. Her chest tightened with every prayer, knowing it was a lie. She had Spencer's child inside her, and Spencer was long gone. By the 8th month, her back ached constantly. Her legs swelled, her breath came short. She avoided mirrors because the sight of her own body frightened her. She had given herself to a man who had left her without a word, and now her future grew inside her belly. Every day she imagined the moment of birth, the gasps when the child emerged, the skin too dark to belong to Gilles. Every day she imagined her mother's face when the truth became undeniable. The night the pains began, rain lashed against the roof of the house. The wind rattled the shutters and thunder rolled across the sea. Titine cried out, clutching her stomach, as the first contraction seized her. Maman, she gasped, it is time. Celine rushed to her side, her face drawn and tight. Do not scream. The neighbors will hear. I cannot help it, Titine sobbed, sweat breaking across her brow. Celine gripped her arm and hauled her up. Come. We will do this in your room. No one outside this house will see what you bring into the world tonight. The hours blurred into pain. Titine labored on the narrow bed, her cries muffled into the pillow. The storm outside grew worse, lightning flashing across the sky, the thunder booming like drums. As the midwife stood watch, Celine moved quickly, bringing towels, heating water, barking orders for Titine to breathe. "Push," Celine demanded when the moment came. "Push and get it out of you." Titine screamed as if her body tore. The room spun. Her nails dug into the sheet until her hands ached. With one final effort, the child slipped into the world, his cry piercing the roar of the storm. Celine caught him in her hands. For a moment she stared down at the newborn, her breath frozen. Then her face twisted. The child's skin was brown. Titine reached out weakly, her arms trembling. "Let me see him." Celine turned on her with blazing eyes. "You liar." Her voice shook with fury. "You told me this was Gilles' child." Tears streaked Titine's face. "Maman, please. He is mine. Give him to me." Celine clutched the baby to her chest, glaring at her daughter. "Yours? You brought this shame into my house. You made me believe in a lie. Do you know what this means? Everyone will know. They will see it on his skin the moment you step outside." The baby whimpered, his tiny fists curling. Titine pushed herself up, her body weak, her voice desperate. "Please, maman. He is innocent. He is my son." "Innocent?" Celine spat. "He is proof. Proof of your sin. Proof of your betrayal." She turned toward the door, her grip tightening around the infant. "No," Titine cried, dragging herself halfway off the bed before her body collapsed in pain. "Do not take him. Please. I will care for him. I will keep him hidden. Do not take him from me." Celine's face hardened like stone. "You are not fit to keep him. You would ruin us both. Better he be gone than let the world know what you have done." The baby wailed louder. Titine's cries joined his, her voice hoarse and broken. "Do not do this, maman. Please. Please." But Celine turned away, her shoulders rigid, her eyes blazing with a mad certainty. She pulled the door open and stepped into the hall, the storm wind howling through the crack of the shutters. The last Titine saw was the bundle in her mother's arms as she disappeared into the night. Her scream tore through the house, echoing above the thunder. "Maman, no," she cried, but the storm swallowed her voice. The house felt empty the moment the front door closed. The storm outside was softening to rain, but inside the silence pressed down on everything. Titine lay half off the bed, her arms trembling, her body hollow after the hours of labor. She turned her head toward the cradle of blankets where her baby should have been, but the space was empty. Her chest heaved as she dragged in air. The silence was unbearable. "Come back," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Please bring him back." The only answer was the steady drip of water in the bathroom. She tried to push herself upright, but pain tore through her abdomen and she slumped forward. Blood soaked the towel beneath her, warm and sticky. Panic surged. She pressed a hand between her legs and felt the wetness seeping through. Her phone sat on the nightstand, just beyond reach. She clawed at the sheets, pulling herself closer, then stretched until her fingers brushed the device. With a weak tug, the phone tumbled into her lap. Her vision swam as the screen lit her face in a blue glow. No missed calls. No messages. She opened her mother's thread. The last message was hours old, a photo of towels, a bowl of hot water, and a red heart emoji. The memory of Celine's brisk voice snapped inside her head. "This is your chance. You cannot fail me." Her thumb shook over the keyboard. She typed erased, typed again. At last she sent, "Maman, I am bleeding." The message marked as delivered. No dots appeared. No reply came. Titine slumped against the wall, clutching the phone like a lifeline. She considered calling an ambulance. She could picture it clearly, flashing lights, neighbors watching through their windows, phones raised to film. The whispers in church. The truth dragged into the open. Her breath grew ragged. She forced herself to the floor, crawling across the wooden boards, leaving smears of blood in her wake. The bathroom door stood open, the light glaring harshly on the tiles. She dragged herself in, clung to the sink, and pulled upright. The mirror showed a stranger. Her hair plastered to her face, lips dry and cracked, eyes dark with shadows. She tore away the soaked towel and replaced it with another. Then she rinsed herself with trembling hands. The warm water turned pink in the basin. She braced against the counter until her dizziness passed, then stumbled back to bed. Her phone buzzed. The midwife. "How are you? Do you need me?" Titine typed, "The baby is gone. My mother took him. I am scared. I am still bleeding." The dots appeared, then vanished. A minute later the reply came, "Are you safe? Do you need the clinic? I can come." Her eyes blurred. She typed, then come. She erased it. She typed, "I am okay." Erased again. At last she sent, "Please do not tell anyone." "I will keep your secret," the midwife answered. "Drink water. Take 2 ibuprofen if you can. Change pads every hour. If you soak more than 1 in an hour, call me or go to the clinic." "Okay, thank you," Titine typed back. She set the phone on her chest and closed her eyes. But every time her lashes touched, she saw the baby's face, tiny fists curled and crying. The sound haunted the silence, echoing in her ears long after he was gone. At dawn, the front door opened. Footsteps echoed down the hall. The smell of wet clothes drifted in. "Maman?" Tatine's voice was a rasp. Celine appeared in the doorway, hair damp, face grim. She held a glass of water. "Drink." "Where is he?" "Drink." Titine obeyed, her hands trembling, the water sloshing against the rim. She swallowed 2 mouthfuls before setting it on the table. Her voice steadied with effort. "Where is my son?" Celine's eyes flicked away. "He is safe." "With whom?" "People who know how to keep quiet. People who will raise him right." Tatine's heart broke anew. "You gave him away." "I saved you," Celine snapped. "Do you think you could walk into town with that baby? Everyone would see the truth. They would see that stranger written all over him. You would be ruined. I would be ruined." "He is mine," Titine whispered, her whole body shaking. "You had no right." Celine's mouth twisted. "I had every right. I kept you fed. I kept you clothed. And what do? Spread your legs for a stranger and then lie to me about whose child you carried." Tears stung Tatine's eyes. "Please. He is innocent. Bring him back." Celine's expression softened for only a moment, then hardened again. "You need to rest." She turned and set a steaming bowl of broth on the table. "Drink this. It will help." Titine sat weakly at the table. The broth steamed in the fine china bowl, filling the room with the smell of chicken and onion. She lifted the spoon with shaking hands and forced herself to swallow. The warmth slid down her throat, calming the ache in her chest. But as she ate, her eyelids grew heavy. The exhaustion that had gripped her after the birth returned, dragging her under. She finished the last spoonful and pushed the bowl away. Celine's voice was gentle now. "Come. You should be in bed." Too tired to argue, Titine let her mother guide her back down the hall. She sank into the mattress, her body sinking as though into water. Her mother tucked the blanket around her, smoothed her hair once, and stood watching. Tatine's breathing deepened as sleep claimed her. Celine lingered in the room, her hands gripping the bed frame. She stared at her daughter, curled beneath the blanket, face slack with sleep. Celine wondered how she had been so foolish. She had believed the story about Gilles. She had let herself imagine the Chancellor heir, a salvation for their family, a way out of debt and disgrace. But of course it was not true. Gilles had been on the island for a wedding. Taylor had been at his side. Titine had never had a chance with him. Yet she had let herself believe. She had been desperate enough to cling to hope. Now the proof of her daughter's betrayal had cried out into the night, its skin brown, its features undeniable. A stranger's child and a shame too heavy to carry. She left the room quietly and went to the kitchen. The empty bowl sat on the table, a thin film of broth and herbs clinging to the rim. She washed it, dried it, and set it in the cupboard. Her purse lay tucked behind the flour canister. Inside was the envelope, thick with bills. Not a fortune, but enough to pay the overdue electricity, enough to keep the banker away for another month. Enough to keep them alive until she found another path forward. Celine sat at the table, resting her chin on her clasped hands. She had tried to groom Titine for a respectable life. Tried to push her into the arms of a man whose name would lift them both. She had failed. Instead, Titine had chosen to act like a whore, giving herself to a passing stranger who used her and disappeared. Bitterness gnawed at Celine, but calculation steadied her. Titine was still young. With her looks, she could still attract someone. Not a husband, not now. She would not attract a respectable man of means. Most people in the parish knew about the pregnancy, even though Titine was isolated at home for the last 5 months. Titine would have to align with an older man with money. Men like that came to the island all the time, slipping into resorts, renting villas, leaving their wives behind. They wanted beauty, silence, and company. She would be a concubine. It was not respectable, but it was survival. Respectability was a luxury they could no longer afford. Celine pressed her palms against the table, her mind sharpening into resolve. She would not let her daughter's weakness drag them both into ruin. If she had to sell Titine's beauty to save them, so be it. At least she still had her daughter. And at least Titine was still young enough to be molded again. She had to find a suitable match, but this time it would be for a different purpose. 6 weeks passed, and the house felt smaller every day. Titine slept too much and woke with a fog behind her eyes. She sat in the kitchen with a blanket over her shoulders even when the afternoon sun turned the walls warm. She kept her phone face down on the table. When it buzzed, she ignored it. When it stopped, she stared at the silent black screen and felt relief and dread at the same time. Celine cooked and brewed. There was always a pot on the stove and a jar steeping by the window. She called them tonics and said they would help Titine's nerves. She stirred a pinch from small paper packets into soups and teas. Mint and chamomile were easy to name. The darker notes were not. After dinner, Titine's eyelids drooped. Her body went quiet. She slept in the chair and woke in her bed with no memory of the steps between. One afternoon, Titine lifted a glass and watched particles swirl just beneath the surface. "What is in this?" she asked. Celine did not look up from the cutting board. "Leaves. Your stomach needs them. It makes me sleepy. You need sleep." Titine set the glass down and folded the blanket tighter. "I need my son." Celine's knife paused. "I am not discussing that again. I am his mother." "And I am your mother," Celine said. "Drink." Titine drank because arguing took more strength than she had. Heat moved through her throat, and the edges of the kitchen went soft. Celine started taking regular trips into the city. She left before sunrise with her hair set and her lipstick sharp, wearing the blazer that made her look like she had money. She came home after dark smelling like rain and someone else's cologne. She counted out bills at the table and stacked them under her palm. "You saw someone," Titine said once. "I saw a few people," Celine said. She did not lift her eyes. "I am looking for a match." "For whom?" "For you," Celine said. "You did not hold on to the one I had in mind. Now I have to work with the life you left me." Titine stared. "Gilles was never going to marry me." "You could have," Celine said. "I gave you the tools, the best school, the right dresses. College, the gallery internship. I took out a mortgage so you could socialize with the kind of people who make decisions. Do not tell me it was impossible." It was never going to be him. Titine thought of a boy she had dated in college. He was from a nice family, but they did not possess the wealth her mother desired. Celine set the knife down. "It almost was. You were too young to understand how close we came. Do not tell that story again." "I will tell it because it is the lesson," Celine said. "He came home on leave. I sent you with wine and a proper meal. You were beautiful and kind. He drank just enough to consider his options. Then he remembered his station and you came home crying. That is how close we were. One breath away. You could have kept your legs closed a little longer for the right man. Instead, you opened them for a stranger." Titine closed her eyes. "I am tired." "Good," Celine said. "Sleep. I have errands." Celine took the early bus 2 days later and sat in a cafe where the floor was black tile and the cups were heavy. She ordered a small coffee and moved the spoon around the saucer to make it last. She checked her phone and looked at the door every time it opened. On her third look, a man in a gray suit approached. He was very tall and serious looking. His clothes fit too well for retail. A small pin sat on his lapel. He removed his hat. "Madame Girard," he said. "Yes." My employer would like to invite you to dinner next week, he said. May I send a car for you? Who is your employer? Ambrose Marveau. Celine nodded once. What night? Wednesday. I will be ready. The car came on Wednesday. Black. Quiet. Leather that smelled like money. The driver wore gloves and did not speak. The restaurant had no sign. A server took Celine down a hall to a private room. The air was cool and still. A man stood to greet her. Madame Girard, he said. She stopped for a heartbeat. The left half of his face was smooth and handsome. Straight nose. Clear eye. The right half was covered with a lambskin mask tailored to fit like his skin. The combination was disarming. Celine met both halves at once. She kept her voice even. Monsieur Marveau, she said. Thank you for coming, he said. Please sit. They ate small plates that tasted expensive and felt like nothing. Celine used her knife and fork with the care she had practiced at school dinners. Ambrose watched her with interest and did not feel like hunger. How is your daughter? He asked. She is recovering, Celine said. May I ask her age? 28. Beautiful, he said. I saw her once when she was young. Celine lifted her glass. She was meant to bloom in a good life. That was the plan. Plans change, he said. She set the glass down. You asked me here for a reason. Please say it. Ambrose folded his napkin. I would like to make you an offer that would benefit us both. I am not going to pretend it is romance. I am practical. I assume you are as well. Go on. I want a wife, he said. I can provide a house, a reliable monthly allowance, the security a woman needs. In return, I expect companionship, discretion, and heirs. I desire your daughter. Celine watched him. He did not blink. He had not looked at his reflection in the water glass or flinched when the server had approached his injured side. She nodded at the table, not at him. What is the offer? She asked. He named a number. The sound of it was neat and small. It would clear 2 late mortgage payments. It would buy groceries. It would not remove the bank from her throat. It would not lift them. You think that will solve my problems, Celine said. It is a starting point, he said. The rest would come with marriage. It is insulting. It is honest, he said. Celine stood. I have to go. Ambrose rose as well. He did not block the door. He did not reach for her. The car will take you home, he said. No matter your decision. She left without shaking his hand. The next morning, Lucien, Ambrose's manservant, called. Monsieur Marveau will call at your home this afternoon, he said. Celine looked at the clock, then at the bedroom where Titine was sleeping. She replied with a single word. Fine. At 3, there was a knock. Celine opened the door and stepped aside. Ambrose entered with the grace of someone who had owned many rooms. His shoes did not squeak on the tile. He looked at the framed photos, the stack of unpaid envelopes hidden under a magazine, the flowered couch with a thin throw to cover a worn place. He looked at Celine in the same way he had looked at the room. Then he saw Titine. She had put on a long black dress mourning the lost child. She had braided her hair, but it was still beautiful. She stood straight because she had practiced that all her life. Her eyes were ringed but clear. Ambrose took one full look and something changed in his face. It was small, like a light adjusting behind glass. Good afternoon, Titine said. Good afternoon, he said. His voice sounded different than it had at dinner. Softer at the edges. Celine waited. Ambrose looked at Titine again, then at Celine, then toward the door. I have mistaken something, he said. Forgive me. He turned and left. The door closed with a sound that felt like an answer. Celine stared at the wood as if it would speak. What did he see? She said. Me, Titine said. That is not helpful, Celine snapped. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Make tea. No. Sit. I will make it. She moved into the kitchen and set water to boil. The flame looked weak. There was a knock at the door before the kettle could sing. The man in the gray suit stood on the steps with an envelope. Monsieur Marveau asked me to deliver this, he said. Celine took it and closed the door. She slid a finger under the flap and removed a single sheet. The letters were dark and careful. The number sat in the middle of the page like a brick on a white sheet. It was the sum of a debt and a future. Her pulse kicked against her skin. What is it? Titine asked. Celine read aloud because her throat would not trust a paraphrase. He will pay off the mortgage in full. He will settle the utilities and taxes. He will provide a substantial monthly allowance. Half delivered immediately upon agreement. Half upon the birth of a first child. She looked up. He added this line. The allowance continues for life regardless of outcome following the first year. Titine felt the floor shift under her feet. He wants a child. He wants an heir, Celine said. The man in the gray suit had not left the porch. Celine opened the door again. Is this a joke? No, he said. Monsieur Marveau would like you to consider it carefully. He does not want you to feel pressured in public. Why did he leave without a word? He had a previous appointment, the man said smoothly. He will not disturb you again today. Celine closed the door and leaned her back against it. She stared at the paper as if it could burn. She walked to the table and set it down as if it might crack. She did not sit. She circled the chair, then stopped herself. Sit, Titine said. You look unwell. Celine sat. She put her hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. I do not like the condition, she said. Half now and half when a child is born, Titine said. That is not a marriage. That is a contract. Celine looked at her daughter. Every marriage is a contract. Most people are simply romantic about the terms. I do not love him, Titine said. You do not have to love him, Celine said. You have to survive. Titine shook her head. He saw me and left. Then he reconsidered, Celine said. People change their minds. He is practical. He would not put this in writing if he had not decided. What made him decide? I do not know, Celine said. She rubbed her forehead. He is older. He is careful. He has scars. Perhaps he did not think you would endure his face. Perhaps he spared you the choice for an hour. Then he did the numbers and sent his man. He is not buying me. He is selling security, Celine said. For you. For me. For the life you lost when you chose badly. The baby, Titine said. Her voice softened and sharpened at the same time. If I say yes, do I get my baby back? Celine looked at the paper. She looked at her daughter. That was not part of the offer. Then the answer is no. Do not be hasty, Celine said. Think like a woman who plans to live past next month. You need a roof. You need a way out of this town with its mouths. You need a name that closes doors behind you when you walk through them. I need my son, Titine said. That is the only math I can do. Celine stood and walked to the sink. She turned on the water and watched it run. She turned it off. You will not get him without money. You know that. Titine stared at the page. The numbers pulsed. The word mortgage felt like a metal taste. The word heir felt like a lock. What if I cannot give him a child, she said. We are not living inside hypotheticals, Celine said. We are living inside a house with a loan. He has given us a path we can take. We, Titine repeated. Yes, Celine said. We. They sat in the quiet for a long minute. The kettle clicked as it cooled. A motorbike passed on the road and faded into the distance. What do you want me to do? Titine asked. I want you to think, Celine said. I want you to look at the next 5 years instead of the next 5 hours. I want you to decide whether pride feeds you or whether money does. Titine picked up the paper and felt the weight of it between her fingers. She folded it once and set it back down. Tell him I will meet him again, she said. Not to agree. I want to hear what he wants in his own words. Celine watched her daughter and nodded. I will send the message, she said. She did not add the words that sat behind her teeth. I will send the message because this is the first time in weeks you have sat up straight. I will send it because a door opened and I do not know if we will ever see another. She typed a reply to the man in the gray suit. We will meet. Name the time and place. The dots appeared. A time came back. A restaurant with a sign this time. Celine sent a single word. Confirmed. Titine stood. Her legs trembled, but she held. She went to her room and closed the door. She leaned her forehead against the wood and let out a breath she had been holding for 6 weeks. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. The skin across her knuckles had healed. The rest of her had not. She whispered to the quiet room. If this buys me a way to find you, I will pay. If it costs me more than I can pay, I will still try. In the kitchen, Celine folded the offer into the envelope with the bills and slid it behind the flower again. She touched the cabinet door and left her hand there. "Please let this work," she said in a silent prayer. In all the years she had attended church, this was the first time in her life that she meant it. "Please let this fix what I cannot fix." The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened when Celine pressed her hand against her daughter's back and guided her up the steps to the great house. Titine's dress swished across the polished stone, its silk whispering like a warning. She looked radiant in the gown her mother had chosen, cream satin, lace at the cuffs, a modest neckline that still traced her figure. Her hair was swept up, pinned with pearls, her face painted lightly so her natural beauty spoke louder than powder ever could. "You look perfect," Celine whispered as they reached the door. Titine's eyes burned. "I don't want this." "You have no choice," Celine replied, her hand tightening against her daughter's arm. "This is survival. Hold your head high." The manservant, Lucien, opened the door before they could knock. He bowed, his face unreadable, and ushered them into a parlor thick with the scent of old wood and polish. At the far end of the room stood Ambrose Marveau. Half his face was smooth and handsome, the other scarred and twisted, a ruin that seemed almost alive when the candlelight touched it. He wore a black suit with a white shirt and a red rose in the buttonhole. His eyes lingered on Titine. A priest waited nervously by the mantel. He clutched a small book, shifting from foot to foot. His eyes darted from Ambrose to the door, then back to Titine. His lips were pale. "We are ready," Ambrose said. His voice was steady, controlled. The priest cleared his throat. "Monsieur, this is highly irregular. A ceremony so private with no witnesses beyond the household." Ambrose's gaze slid over him, and the priest faltered. "I mean no disrespect," he stammered, "but marriage is sacred. It should not be rushed." "Proceed," Ambrose said, his tone sharp. The priest's eyes flickered to Titine. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His voice trembled as he began the vows. Titine's legs wobbled beneath her gown. She wanted to run, to tear the pearls from her hair and flee into the night. Her mother's hand clamped around hers, a warning disguised as comfort. Celine squeezed hard enough to hurt. "Repeat after me," the priest said. Titine's voice shook as she spoke the words that chained her. Ambrose's responses were low, unhesitating. When the priest pronounced them man and wife, the room felt smaller, the air colder. Celine kissed her daughter's cheek. "This is your future now," she said softly, almost tenderly. Then she stepped back, her face bright with triumph. The priest snapped his book shut, sweat glistening on his brow. He glanced at Titine one last time. His expression was a mixture of pity and dread. Then he turned, nearly stumbling as he hurried out. Ambrose lifted his chin toward the manservant. "Take her to the room." The words dropped like stones. Lucien approached Titine with a calm expression. "Come with me, madam," he said. When they stepped into the hall, his voice lowered. "You must be compliant. Many women have tried before. None succeeded." Titine's heart pounded. What happened to them? The man's eyes flickered. "Do not ask. Do not refuse. That is the only advice I can give you." He opened the door to a chamber unlike anything Titine had ever seen. The room was elegant, lit with amber lamps. Closets lined one wall, their doors carved and gilded. He opened them, revealing silks, velvets, furs, gowns in every shade. Drawers slid out, heavy with jewelry that sparkled under the light. "These are yours," he said. "He enjoys dressing his wives. However, he expects obedience." Titine's throat tightened. "What if I say no?" Lucien's face was grave. "Never say no." He pulled a pale peignoir from the closet and draped it across the bed. Then he drew a bath, filling the marble tub with steaming water that smelled faintly of rose. "Bathe. Dress. Wait for him." His eyes softened for a moment. "And pray." When he left, the door closed with a quiet click that sounded louder than thunder. Titine stripped off the wedding dress and lowered herself into the bath. The water stung her raw skin, but she stayed until the heat numbed her limbs. She dressed in the peignoir, soft against her skin, and sat on the edge of the bed. A cart had been rolled into the room. On it sat a crystal decanter and a single glass filled with amber liquid. She lifted it to her lips and drank. The burn traveled down her throat, spreading warmth through her chest, dulling the fear just enough to keep her from screaming. The door opened. Ambrose entered, removing his gloves. He set them on the dresser and reached for the straps of his lambskin mask. Slowly, he pulled it free. Titine gasped. The scarred half of his face was more grotesque without the covering. The skin pulled tight across bone, the mouth twisted cruelly. The eye gleamed, small and wet like a trapped animal. Ambrose stepped closer. She shrank back on the bed. "Please, wait." His voice was low. "You are mine now." She tried to resist, but his hand clamped around her wrist, twisting it behind her back until she cried out. Pain shot through her arm as the room blurred. The amber liquor fogged her vision. His face loomed above her, the ruined skin a mask of fury. She struggled, but darkness closed in. When she woke, the room was filled with morning light. Her body ached, her arm throbbed, swollen from being twisted behind her back. Bruises marked her body and wrists. She pulled herself upright, trembling. A glorious dress hung in the armoire, scarlet silk that shimmered like fire. She dressed slowly, every movement stiff with pain. When she looked in the mirror, her reflection startled her. She looked beautiful. She also looked broken. She made her way to the dining room, where a table stretched beneath a chandelier. Silver dishes gleamed. The air smelled of butter, garlic, and cream. French delicacies covered the table, dishes she had only seen in magazines. Titine reflected on the fact that her husband's home was far more lavish than Gilles'. She wondered if Taylor would be jealous. Lucien poured her coffee. His eyes met hers, filled with pity. He gave a small shake of his head and placed a finger over his lip, a silent warning. Lucien felt no pity for the others that came before Titine. They came to Ambrose seeking a lavish lifestyle. This woman had been manipulated by her mother. Her child was taken away and used as leverage to force her to comply. He wanted to help her, but he had lived with the family as a child. He grew up with Ambrose. When he came of age, he assumed the role of manservant and had worked for him since. Lucien had never paid a dime for housing, a vehicle, or food. He wore his uniform on most days. He was paid a handsome sum, and he saved most all of it. He no longer had to work, yet he had become a part of this world. He was too ashamed to leave it. Ambrose entered, his steps measured. He wore no mask. He sat at the head of the table and unfolded his napkin. "Eat," he said. Titine lifted her fork, though her stomach churned. The food was magnificent, but each bite tasted like ash. She wished she had said no to her mother. She wished she had taken the job at the gallery after college, the one with the small salary but freedom attached. She wished she had chosen any life other than this. Now she had the jewels, the dresses, the luxury her mother had dreamed of. But her husband was a monster. Across town, Céline strolled the promenade with a new friend, Simone. Her hair was styled, her nails polished. She wore silk scarves and new shoes, her purse heavy with cash. The house was paid for, a part-time housekeeper hired. She spoke of cruises and shopping trips, her laugh ringing with satisfaction. She was almost like Perrine Chancellor now, moving among people who nodded with approval. A few days later, she boarded a ship with Simone. The sea stretched wide, the air crisp. She lifted her eyes toward the hill above the harbor. The mansion stood tall, its windows glinting in the sun. Somewhere inside, her daughter lived the life she had been denied. Céline smiled faintly. She had given up much, but now she had what she wanted. Back at the mansion, Titine prepared once again for bed. She had learned not to say no. She sipped the amber liquor and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. Her body obeyed, but her mind raced. She could not leave until she gave him the heir he demanded. Then she would be trapped or forced to leave one child to save another. Ambrose no longer wore his mask. His ruined face was now her nightly reality. He punished her night after night for wrongs she did not understand. She had no idea that the fury he unleashed on her body was aimed at Titine Girard, her father. Each day he took his revenge through her. The nights ended in darkness. In the mornings, she was dressed by a young maid named Lisette, who avoided her eyes. At breakfast, Ambrose spoke of children, of heirs, of the future. She ate with quiet resolve, holding to one fragile hope, that if she bore him a child, she might see her son again. She clung to that thought as the only light left. On the ship, Celine leaned against the rail as the wind tangled her scarf. A wealthy man in a white jacket touched her elbow and offered champagne. She laughed, tilting the glass. She looked every bit the woman she had wanted Titine to become. She was wealthy now. She was admired. But she knew in her heart it could not last forever. As was the case twice before, her lifestyle was expensive. In the mansion, Titine sipped her second glass of the amber liqueur and waited in the silence of her gilded prison. Her eyes fixed on the door. Her arm ached where it had been twisted. Her body carried new bruises each morning. She wore fine clothes, ate delicacies, and lived in luxury, but she was trapped with a beast. She whispered to herself as she lifted the glass to her lips. "One day I will be free. One day I will take back my life." Her voice trembled, but she continued to say the words every night. The door opened. Ambrose stepped inside. She forced herself not to flinch. She could not resist, not yet. But in her mind, Titine was already planning her freedom. The darkness swallowed her again, but somewhere deep inside, the hope of her child kept her going. 2 months had passed. Celine was on a cruise in the Mediterranean. The sea was bright and endless, the horizon stretching like a promise that could never be kept. On the deck of the ship, Celine laughed at a joke she barely heard. The man beside her wore gold on his wrist and spoke of Parisian apartments and vineyards in Bordeaux. She sipped champagne, her lips painted red, her hair held in place by pins that sparkled. To anyone looking, she was the picture of success, a woman who had secured the life she always deserved. But when her laughter faded, she turned her eyes back across the sea toward the Caribbean. In Martinique, on the hill above the harbor, the mansion stood dark against the sky. Its windows reflected the sun like blind eyes. She thought of her daughter behind those walls, and for a moment her throat tightened. She swallowed more champagne and looked away. In that mansion on a hill, Titine sat at the edge of the bed, silk draped over her bruised skin, the air heavy with perfume and despair. The corridors whispered with footsteps not her own. She could not leave. She could not say no. But her heart clung to a single fragile thread. Her child was out there, somewhere alive. One woman had gained everything she thought she wanted. The other had lost everything but her will to survive. This ends our story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and share this story. Then, subscribe to our channel. Also, be sure to stop by for more stories each week. You can find Hampton Bay books at online book retailers. For more information about the Hampton Bay books, visit denisenicholsbooks.com.